So please put your hands together and welcome with me to the stage Professor Dr. Joachim Schultze and Hartmut Schultze. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Hello.
Thank you.
So hello, I would like to talk to you about the DZNE HPE collaboration about harnessing memory-driven computing for curing or to fight Alzheimer's disease. In that course, I'm talking about memory-driven computing and where's our motivation. We currently see that our data growth does not or is not in sync with compute what we have. Compute is going to go flat. Moore's law is not really holding up anymore. So what we also see is energy consumption. So energy consumption is nowadays of cloud computing is pretty much on the third space here behind China and USA. So we're using a lot of energy to do compute. And as our data grows, we use more and more on this. So this is a real problem, and this is what we want to tackle about. So how do you have to think about this? What is memory-driven computing? Classical von Neumann architecture is a CPU, and you have DRAM, and then you have a network and your storage in behind. What we are doing is we're going to combine this. So what does that mean? Is this really a change? Yes, it is. Since we can integrate memory and storage, we are going to be faster. So what does it mean from a perspective, what do we need as a supporting technology? It's photonics. So if we're talking about photonics here, then we can imagine that we have different systems, and this could then span out to a memory, byte-addressable memory space of 2 to the power of 92, which is 4096 yottabytes. And I'm not sure if anybody knows what yottabytes are. Anybody has an idea? Yes? Perfect. So if you're talking about peta, exa, zeta, yotta. So this is a huge memory space, and you could imagine that every of your data is all in one single memory. How does it look like currently? Currently, all the computers in the cluster work together over a network. So you have different systems, attached memory, and they cannot really communicate. So the industry was looking into on how to speed up all this. And now we're turning this around. So what we're having here is that now the memory is in the center of everything. So we have persistent memory attached to our fabric. And that speeds up. That's memory-driven computing, and maybe anybody of you has heard about the Gen Z consortium, which was built of a lot of members. We have now over 52 members on going into that direction so that we can exploit the future technology on this. So we have special purpose cores, compute elements connected via photonics, and a memory persistent pool of memory. And this is something what we introduced with our machine project 2 years ago. And now we are going to put this into life with our use cases. So this is the Gen Z fabric, which is in between. And imagine what you can do about this. In our memory-driven computing solution, you are going to right-size everything from a perspective that you use the elements which are then attached to the fabric and build your custom compute nodes and systems around this. So this is the ultimate goal of composability. So you can build over a data pipeline, single machines, and do your workloads and step through it. But addressing all the data you want to manipulate or you want to compute with exactly with these machines over the pipeline. So this facilitates here again. Also, as we know that the Gen Z specification is out there since February, this is taking time for putting this into silicon, of course. And we know that we have a hardware development which is going to be in sync with software development. And this is where we then came into the collaboration with the DZNE. transforming performance. So we have really factors. It's a factor. It's not a percentage where we increase speed here. For example, in Spark memory analytics, this was over 150 times similarity search. So if you compare pictures to each other, it takes about a factor of 200. And then we have large-scale graph interference 1,000 times faster. And if we completely rethink the code, we're going 8,000 and plus faster on different situations like Monte Carlo simulations, for example. When you look up on an index, which you put every pre-compute into your memory, you can imagine that of being something like intelligent cheating. Instead of computing everything, you just look it up. So that's, of course, much faster. So now I would like to hand over to Joachim Schultze, who is talking about the content where we could use this technology.
Yeah, so welcome from my side as well. This is our research building in Bonn, fantastic research building. I'll tell you shortly why we came to Hewlett Packard. You saw the figures beforehand, and we learned about this actually on a YouTube over the internet. And we thought if they can do it so much faster, and we have enormously big data in biomedical sciences, we would like to see whether we can do the same. So before I show you what kind of data we're looking at, I'll introduce you shortly who we are, because you should know that what happens in Germany about Alzheimer. The German government has developed a plan to have health centers, and one of them is the German Center for Neurodegenerative Diseases, called DZNE short. It has 10 sites in Germany. The headquarters is in Bonn. You see that we have many researchers already. We were fastly growing. Now we have more than 1,120 people, and our staff comes from all over the world. And we're very successful in science. What we cover basically is, in contrast, very nice last year when we had our new building, even the Chancellor Merkel came and visited the institute, and she was very happy to see that buildings can be built very quickly in Germany, because we were spot on, just 4 weeks late, not like in Berlin. So what do we do in this center? So we will do everything from very basic science and life science back to going to patients and see how we can help them in their houses at home and see what we can do. So it's capturing everything. So clinical research is there, disease models, molecular signaling, and population and studies in genetics. So we think to answer the question whether we can cure Alzheimer or make Alzheimer better, we need to cover everything, because we have no clue where the knowledge comes that really makes the breakthrough. Now, what's also clear is if you do all this, you generate enormously large data. Yeah? So one thing that we have is clear for us that we have enormous data. The reason why Alzheimer is important for us to study is we have already 1.6 million Alzheimer patients in Germany today. It will grow up to 2 million. It's very costly for us, and it's one of the diseases that still rises. Yeah? So we have very good successes in cancer and heart attacks and so on, but not with Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases. The numbers are very much growing still. And we're not doing enough for that. If you look at the costs, we have about 29,000 to 68,000 per patient per year. We spend only 60 euros per patient per year on research. So we really have to do something. This is the infrastructure in modern biomedical science. What we really would like to do is to combine biomedical research, on the left side, with prevention research and clinical medicine. And this is driven by a huge flood of data that we get from the most modern high-throughput technologies. And one of them is really answering and addressing the genome of these patients. So the genetic information, the inheritance. And this is the example I would like to give you, because this is where we started. We said, like, if we want to know what memory-driven computing can do to us, we need a use case where we have a situation where we have data and we're spending too much time on just calculations. This is depicted here, very simple example. You see this on the left side could be you or me. And what we're taking from patients is a biopsy somewhere. And then you have the double helix, which is the genetic information. And we can read this now like the book of life. And then we basically have to put it into a computer. And we're not only taking one, we're taking hundreds to thousands of those. And they're huge, and we have to basically do a lot of analysis on those. And that takes weeks, even months sometimes. These data are big, and they become much bigger these days. So just to have one copy of one genome, we need about half a terabyte. And we're saving many more data of these patients. So this is only a little piece of the data that we're saving per patient. And it grows immensely. Yeah? So this is ongoing. And the number of genomes that are sequenced in the world are also growing. At the moment, there's about 1 million that is sequenced. That's the estimation. And you see these are log scales. We're estimating to have up to 1 billion of sequenced humans in the world by maybe 2025. And all these data have to be stored somewhere. And the difference to many other areas, we do not throw away data because it's patients' data and their value still in 20 years. We're doing even studies that take 30 years, so we really want to store all this data and work on the data. So what we have to ask is then, can this technology help us to do this? And this is where I show you the example now, is at that step where we get the data and then do the pre-processing. And we could do that. So without going in all to the details, we had to adapt some of the things. One of my co-workers is even in the audience who has done all these calculations, Matthias Becker. He's a computational scientist who came to life sciences to help us doing this together with the people from Hewlett Packard Labs in Palo Alto. And what they could show is that we took the best algorithm for this step that's in the field. It had been introduced as near-optimal computing on normal HPC, and we put it onto the memory-driven system, adapted the code a little bit, and then basically could increase the speed by 100-fold. That's not nothing, that's big time. Usually we're talking about 5% increase or 5% less time. This was 100-fold, and on top, we were basically saving energy because it's so much faster. And I'll hand over because there's a couple of technical things that Hartmut wants to show us.
Mic, please. So you have seen this, and why does it work? So just depict this simple picture. If you have in a conventional system, you have a whole stack where you have to go through. It's like 25,000 instructions what you need to put one data point from a processor to a storage and back. So if you do all this shuffling all the time, you can imagine this holds up a whole lot thing. If you don't do that, then you see the right picture. You only do it in memory, and you only need 3 instructions. So easy question, what is faster? Yes, do the right thing. And that's what we actually did. So as we saw, speed was 100 times up, compute power down, so we measured the user time needed for doing the calculation. And this went down by 60 to 70%, which means we can do either have reduced energy to do the same topics, or we can do even more. Since we are fast, we can do it repetitively, what we actually need. And the good thing is we did the same thing on the MFT, which is the memory fabric test bed. So we calculated that on the prototype, which has this architecture also, and we saw that we could scale as much nodes we have around this. So you remember the picture I showed you, the circle, and you put everything in the middle, this completely scales. And this is then depicted by this one. So when there's one thing, what you have to remember, we basically eliminate I/O. Don't think about I/O anymore, but you have to think differently. The good news about this is that even if you don't change anything in your code, through the new technology, you will get faster. If you change the code, you will get extremely faster. And if you do that, you will see results like the ones we saw in our algorithm, and that really helps also how to approach things. So change your mindset on the approach.
The mindset has to change, and we see that when we talk to colleagues, even from high-performance computing, that if you introduce the system, they say like, oh, I don't get it. And we also had this. We had to learn that we can answer questions or ask questions that we were not thinking even of. And this actually changes the mindset of our researchers at the Institute. So, for example, one mindset that we're changing right now is that wherever in the world sequencing happens, our view is that we're not sending the sequencing data somewhere into the cloud because this is enormous traffic. We're going to keep the sequencing data at the sequencing machines in the memory-driven systems and only give metadata that are calculated by algorithms that are brought to us back to the people that need this information. Also, we have the feeling that's much more safe than pushing your genome data in the world around. Yeah? And we have the ownership issue is all solved by European standards. So this is our new view, and this is this think different of how the genomic data would be handled. But we go one step further. You can now do the same for all the other things. We can do that with clinical data, with laboratory data, with imaging data, and they all could be orchestrated the same way and then put together. That's actually what we want. Remember what I said? We do from basic science to even science at the patient, at their houses, and this all collects a lot of data, and they are interconnected. We want to get them all together. And this can only be done if we can access them all at the same time. This is not the case how we're working now, and we have to basically do this different thinking, that space memory is no issue anymore. And we go one step beyond, and that's not only true for science institutions, but I think this is going to be true for any organization that is distributed across the world. So what we have at our situation is that, as I showed you, that the DZNE has 10 sites, and we built these systems at every of the sites. And then in the end, the intelligence, the algorithms will be shared, the data will stay locally, and then what our vision is that we can basically send the algorithms from colleagues or from ourselves. If I'm interested about genome data that are collected in Munich, I will ask my colleague, can I access your data? I'll send him the algorithm, he does the calculation and sends it back to me, the answer. The genomic data is huge. I don't have to move them around anymore. It's all stored in memory over there. The answer I'm getting back is enormously small and very easy to transport. So that's our concept, and I think we're on a good way. We have the first machine in Bonn now, which is the Superdome Flex. So we can now calculate with Hewlett Packard at their sites, but also in our own institution.
I can show you the roadmap where we are going right now. So where we did the first experiments and you saw this software and hardware co-development, we saw, of course, we needed to use current technology. So we used the Superdome X, which is the largest in-memory system we could have with a shared memory. And now, in end of last year, the Superdome Flex was published or came to the market. And this is now the evaluation, and we have the possibility to have as much as 48 terabyte in memory. So we can use 48 terabytes right now. And as I said before, the complete, where we are going for with memory-driven computing is a memory space of 4,096 yottabytes. So a single machine could capture all data we have currently on this planet. Of course, if the data grows beyond that, we need probably more than one machine. But as of now, this would be sufficient, at least from the memory space. And now we have to find out and develop the technologies beneath with our partners to then really go into different areas. So from a principle, from an architecture, this goes for every single thing. So you have large-scale systems, you have container structures, you have edge devices. You could do it in an exascale computer and on a single machine on a rack scale on a data center scale. The important thing is the architecture by itself. Think of eliminating I/O. I say this again because this is the key. And this is all what data-centric and memory-driven computing is all about. So there's a roadmap on this, how to get this done in the future. I'm not going to every point of this. People are working on every single thing, putting this into the different products. The important thing, though, is have the use cases and have the benefits out from the use cases. So with that, that's it. Oh yeah. Okay.
So that's what we wanted to show you. We are very happy at the Institute. What we learned is that many other institutions at our headquarters, Helmholtz institutions, are thinking of looking at what we have. There's other interest in academia already, and I have the feeling that this is really now quickly expanding. We're seeing that with very great joy, and we're also happy that we were the first ones started about 2 years ago. So we're a little bit in lead at the moment, but there's a lot of interest. Thank you for your time, and I think we're both happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you so much. You can hold on to that. Thank you. Thanks so much. And we have Caro with the mic. Right there. If you have any questions, this is your chance. Don't worry, I have one. But here, we go first with you, sir.
You said that right now you basically have to ask for this kind of information. Like, okay, there's some data in Munich that I want to access, and I'm contacting the colleague, and he has to send them to me. Are there ways to enable people to actually search for the information without having to actually ask, okay, do you have data about those kind of patients? Can I access them?
This is more an issue of medical data. If you let's presume for a moment we don't have any medical data, just pure research data that are not human connected. Then it's very easy. You could just have that open, and say like within an institution you share. But with medical data and data privacy, it looks a little bit different. There's a lot of regulations. So in this case, even within an institution at different sites, you would put in some hurdles in the sense of control that there is surely only things done that have been ethically approved beforehand. So this is just a purely medical issue. It has nothing to do with the data. Technically, of course, you could basically say like, I have a distributed situation of my data. There's always stored somewhere in this memory-driven machines, and I have the right to access them, and I can send my algorithms there to do the calculations locally, and send me back just the data, the calculated data that are usually much smaller than just having the data there. At the moment, I can tell you how this happens. So we have another site in Tübingen that also does genetic data analysis. And if we want to analyze their data, they're sending hard drives by truck. And that's not sufficient, and that's not safe. And we want to avoid that in the future.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? You got to be curious about the future. So I'm super curious about the future. If you could look into the future, what significant milestones would you want to see coming out of your work?
You want to start? Yeah, start. So as I said, right now in our field, and I think that's in many other research fields as well, and even any organization that has knowledge in-house in form of data, we're looking for something that I can access everything at all time immediately, without getting things back from somewhere that they are in archive or backed up or whatever. And this is just not possible at the moment. But for medical research, particularly for these complex diseases, and Alzheimer is only one example. The same is true for cancer. The same is true for atherosclerosis, for obesity, for diabetes. We have so much information that we cannot access and relate to each other. Simple correlation analysis of different kinds of things is impossible with the current technology. Once I can think of, I have them all in place, they're all available and accessible, and I have them in formats where I can put algorithms on, the mind is changing. So that's my view of the future, that this will really enable a completely new kind of science, or if you wish so, knowledge-driven information finding. And science is only a good example, but I'm pretty sure that other areas have exactly the same in business intelligence, etc., etc.
Thank you so much.
Maybe I can add to this, since we're talking about different industries here, and different industries have the same high-performance data analysis problem. And I'm currently already talking with different customers from telcos, from science, from automotive, and they all have the same topic. And if they can get faster for getting the knowledge out of their data, what they have, not shuffling around all the time, they will improve by far. So the factors we saw here, they will apply for these other industries as well.
So this is applicable for every industry,
yes.
essentially.
Yeah. Yes, that's what at least that's my impression right now, and I'm absolutely confident it is.
Thank you.
What I see with interest is, we have also access to, for example, the large high-performance computing centers in Germany, like Jülich, Stuttgart, and Munich, and they were always driven off faster, 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 with a very specific applications, for example, in astrophysics or theoretical physics. And this changes now. So we still all want to have faster, faster. That's no point. But now, there are disciplines coming that have more data, and now we're opening a new dimension. And the idea is not going only faster, but also being able to access more data and then go into the upper right corner of such a thing. So there's also mind change, even on the highest level of computing, at least in our country here.
Thank you so much. If we have no further questions from the audience, I want to thank you a lot for coming, for inspiring us, for working on this.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. A big round of applause, please. Thank you.
Right.